Hello to everybody, my name is Stefano and welcome to this episode of the Think and Analyze podcast. So today we will discuss theory versus action. Now, let's dive into the topic. What I mean with theory and action. Although I believe it's pretty self-evident, I would say that theory is what gives you a plan for acting. It gives you an idealization about how things could or should be, generally speaking, whereas action gives you a direct experience. As a result of this direct experience, you get knowledge, which is, however, only applicable to a specific situation. However, it is much more specific and detailed because you lived that experience in the first person. Now, how you could imagine theory and action? This is actually something I have thought about for a long time now. I always had this kind of image in my head of how to represent with an image theory and action. And I will, hopefully I can, but I guess I will be able to do that. I will put some images right now during the episode so that you visualize better what I'm saying, because I don't know, I don't even know if I'm able to describe at best um, what I'm saying, because some things I don't know honestly how to say them. But the first example that I think you could think of for imaging theory in action is a graph. Okay, um, in a graph, if we want to represent theory, um, yeah, imagine this graph. Theory, sorry, in this graph, um, the horizontal line represents the number of the experiences, whereas the vertical line represents the experience itself. So you could have, yeah, the experience itself, the experience of each of the experiences represented by the horizontal line. Now, if you want to represent theory, I would say that this, or even this, is what you could think of when, as I said, trying to represent theory, because you see that theory covers a large number of experiences, but it is not really high in the vertical line of the experience. So you have theory is what gives you a general plan, a really general understanding of a specific situation, of a number of situations, but it does not give you a sort of very high, very specific knowledge about every experience. And so you have these two possible images. I guess that with theory, you can, like, if you are lucky, you get the first image on my left, but I would say that generally you get the second image, which is um, on my right, simply because uh, for by its definition, theory cannot really be very specific unless it is covering a very specific topic itself. So in that case, you might go a little bit higher on the vertical line of the experience, but generally I would say that these two images represent what I'm saying. Now, if we change and go and think about how you could represent action in a graph, you have this image and this image. I guess you can see where I'm going, because as you see in the first image on my left, on your left also, you have like this sort of really high in the scale of the vertical line. So you have a really deep knowledge about that specific experience, which is represented by the very first column, and then some of that knowledge like can cover also other similar experiences, but it goes low and it goes basically to zero very fast. Also on the second image on my and on your right, you have another possible case, and I believe there are many more. I mean, these are just two examples in which you have like a simple a medium height column on the left, and then you have 0 0 0 0, and then you have another sort of peak of knowledge, um, which goes high very fast, and then it goes low very fast as well. So these are two possible cases. Why am I representing these images? Because I believe that they give you a better understanding of what I'm saying. That is, action and generally direct experience gives you clearly a very specific knowledge about something, but it does not cover a lot of cases. It does not cover a number of cases, whereas theory is the opposite. It covers a large number of cases, but it is not very high in the scale of specific knowledge. Also, action, just like theory doesn't necessarily, just like theory isn't necessarily uh, like blocked and cannot reach a very high level of knowledge. In the same way, action that is not sure to be just like I represented it. It could be a little bit lower in terms of experience and a little bit larger in terms of number of experiences. It depends, but these are sort of the two ends of the spectrum. Now, another way through which you can picture and imagine theory and action, but I'm not so sure about this example because I don't really have that much knowledge of mathematics and those topics. So I will stay. I will not explain totally this example simply because I don't know. I sort of give you an input, kind of a very general thought, and just to give you another example, just to give you a better understanding, another idea. And if we were to represent a theory in action, you could also imagine them like on a line in which are represented numbers, so 0, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, let's say all up to 10. Theory sort of covers um, the singular numbers, so 1, sorry, 0, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5 is like a point. Every number is like a point. Whereas action does not cover all the numbers, but it cover it covers all the space between, let's say, two numbers. So, for example, it covers the space between 2 and 4. Therefore, it is not a point, but it is a line, we could say. And since between 2 and 4 you have 3, but you also have 2.5, and also 2.2, 2.1, 2.01, and all those kind of things. We could, this is just to say that action covers a space which is defined, but it is very deep within itself. So that was another example I thought about. Now, having said that, what are the implications of this of what we just said? Well, basically, there is the need to mix both theory and action. And if you don't do it, you simply don't become, in my opinion, seriously experienced with something. It's not that you won't have experience, but it's like if you really want to go deeper into a field and really know about it, really be an expert about it, you like really are forced to mix both of them. Now, of course, if you have like a really large number of, if you have a huge experience and you have never backed it up with theory, you could still be seriously experienced it. But in terms of time, I would say that generally if you also had the theory, you would have reached that level of experience in a shorter amount of time. And yeah, that is basically the implications. Now, I now want to explain a little bit about my experience, my personal experience, just to give you, just to talk about it, because I want to share with you my experience. I'm, as I said numerous times in this podcast, I like to think, and so generally I tend to really have too much theory and almost nothing of action. So for this reason, and I know this is just my perspective, I don't really think that objectively there is something which is superior to something else. I believe that action is more important than theory just for me, because, as I said, since I like naturally tend to think and have a lot of theories in my head, I believe that action is more important because I have to almost force myself to act in order to gain that direct experience. But you could also, well, I guess that is like really possible, and there are, of course, people in this world that are like this. It is possible that you are the opposite, so you tend to like do a lot of practical stuff. You tend to act a lot more and think a lot less. And so, in that case, perhaps you should implement some theory into your mind, into your way of thinking. And yeah, basically that was my experience. So you also need to you also want to sort of think about yourself. Think what is that I'm more prone to do, and then realize, okay, then if I'm more prone to do theory, then I will need to force myself to do action, and vice versa. Now, while I was writing this episode, I was at this point, which I just ended, and I was like, now what? Now what do I talk about? And I noticed, like, at some point, I realized that this way of thinking correlates to my way of, sorry, these things I just said correlates with my way of thinking and speaking. And I'll explain why in a second. Well, I'll explain why right now. Um, First and foremost, this is something like I really find it peculiar, because I still have not found anyone that is like this, or I should say, maybe I have, but they didn't express it explicitly, just like I have. So really, I contradicted myself right now, but whatever. I rarely use analogies or metaphors because since I believe that you need to, this is kind of a bridge. It's not really correlated strictly, but it kind of relates to this. Since I believe that you should mix both theory and action, I also like when I talk and when I think about things, but also have some concrete references, some concrete examples. So for this reason, I rarely use analogies or metaphors. I really don't like them. I find them like they can help, but I really don't find them very useful because um, whenever someone uses like analogies or metaphors, I'm like, well, if you instead of using analogies or metaphors, you explained better with concrete examples about the situation you are taking into consideration, maybe analogies or metaphors are not needed because you simply described the situation itself. Now, it's true that analogies or metaphors have a logical role, have a sort of I don't know how you could put it, have an important role into being able to um, like merge two different situations and um, sort of connect them through an analogy or metaphors. But like I often find people who, instead of describing precisely what they are talking about, they use a metaphors because, of course, they don't use that to confuse you or to confuse me if they are talking to me. But they use that because they are not really able to dissect, analyze, and describe what they are taking into consideration. So, in order to um, make it easy for them to explain, and this is understandable and justifiable, they use an analogy or metaphor to really to explain better the concept because, of course, analogies and metaphors and all those similar things help in the understanding of that. But I would not use them as my primary source in order to explain something. As a matter of fact, whenever I was when I was in high school and I was studying something and I came across some analogies or metaphors, I consciously omitted them. I consciously avoided them. I didn't study them because I really found them uh, useless because I was like, I can explain at best what is currently happening. I don't need to know the analogy. But of course, then when I was asked about the analogy, I didn't know that. So that was not really a clever move from me, but whatever. Now, another point is that I always try my best to make concrete examples when I'm talking about something theoretical. That is to say that whenever I talk about something, I really try. Of course, it's not possible every time, but I really try to make some concrete examples so that I can show the person I'm talking to that what I'm saying is actually tangible. It is not something that is up in the air, that is just in my mind. It is something that everyone can see. And for these examples, to make an example of me making examples, I didn't really find a concrete example because I guess I forgot about it. I don't know. But I mean, I didn't find a concrete example in my everyday life, but I did find some examples. And for example, in my video of why do we interact with reality the way they do, the way we do, when I make the example with my friend, the explanation, I talk about my friend's attitude. And I mean, if you want to understand what I'm saying, go listen to that episode if you want. And also in the video, how do you teach someone to be conscious? In that video, I really like explain step by step, like I try to explain step by step how you could teach someone to be conscious. And it is not something up in the air that is only theoretical, but it is concrete. It is brought down towards real life. And also, if you want to find, in order to make another example, I wanted to cite my attitude towards philosophy in high school. Basically, I started philosophy in the third year of high school, and I ended studying when I ended high school, so in the fifth year of high school. And in these years, I was really basically every time I was studying and listening to the lesson of philosophy, I was very, very skeptical because basically everything that I was studying wasn't really connected to concrete examples. That is to say that in the book you didn't find concrete examples, and of course I didn't like the subject generally speaking, so I'm not totally right, and I understand that. But whenever I heard something, I was very skeptical because I was like, that is something too up in the air, and that is not something concrete, um, which is connected, related to something practical. Or I should say, I wasn't really able to find the concrete examples. Or I found the way in which, I found the way philosophers talked too like uh, too theoretical. I guess you can say that it was not basic words so that you get a concrete understanding. There were two abstractions, in my opinion, and so I was really, as I said, skeptical. But that was my perspective, and that is not a really totally coherent perspective, but whatever. I mean, there are flaws in the way we think, always, of course. That was just something I wanted to say, just because. Um, Now, also another point is, and this is connected to the point I just made, I often ask for a concrete example to other people when they are talking. So if someone tells me they feel a certain way, I ask them, can you point out what has caused these feelings? Someone tells me they have a certain belief, I ask them why. It's not because I want to dismiss and show them that they are wrong. It's because I believe that making a concrete example helps everybody to understand better themselves and the reality and those kind of things. So, of course, for example, if someone tells me they feel a certain way and they ask them, can you point out what has caused these feelings? It's not because I believe that they are feeling wrong, but if they are able, perhaps with my help or even not, to point out what has caused, like to critically think and see what has caused those feelings, then they are much more aware of how they are as a person and those kind of things. And a final point, I don't really like it when people make utopian arguments, such as people should do this instead of this, or when they make judgments which are based on rationality. And I'll explain better this second statement, but about the first one, yeah, I really find that when people say people should do this instead of this other thing, I'm like, yeah, they should. This is too theoretical. I mean, of course, we all know that things could be better, but instead of teaching someone, well, instead of saying in the air, basically, that people should do this instead of this. Why don't you concretely act in order to change the situation? Because many times, whenever you hear that people should do this instead of this, it's coming from someone who is very like judgmental. This is my experience, judgmental about reality, and does not concretely do something to change it. And about when people make judgments which are based on rationality, you often hear people, and I was like this some years ago, but then I realized that, for example, you hear people saying, I heard recently, basically, why would you listen to, and they name a certain artist, and they rationally justify their sort of question because they say that artist is trash. It doesn't say anything. He doesn't say anything meaningful. They say stupid things and all those kind of things. And I mean, of course, if we were rational, like totally rational, we would say that that is nonsense. But I believe that if you make such a judgment and you say, that person, why would that person listen to that? You are basically ignoring the human nature, which is we are not completely rational people. It's not that one listen to something just because it is good, just because it says something meaningful. One could also like something which is basically trash just because they find it funny. I don't know. I mean, I'm not here to judge, and I would say that so you should, in the same way you should, because uh, there are too many people who judge other people, I would say. Now, we are basically at the end of the episode. I'm now address some arguments. I'm simply going to clarify some things. What I just said is not to say that everything should be related to a concrete example. I mean, if you are not able to make concrete examples, that's fine. Some things cannot be uh, backed up with concrete examples. Some things you can't because because you might also be in a sort of making the first steps towards the topic, and so you are not really able to make concrete examples. But I believe that we should always try to make concrete examples so that you might realize even something which you had not thought before. And also, if you always try to make concrete examples, and sometimes you can, you know that that is because you are still like in the superficial area of the field, and you need to go deeper so that you can find references, find examples of what you are thinking in reality, so that what you say like gains a concrete aspect, gains relevancy. I guess that word exists, and becomes relevant to you and to the people you are telling it. And so yeah, and also, and this is really key, I don't dismiss a theory or a thought just because it has no concrete examples. So if one says to me something, I I could accept it even though it has no concrete examples. But I really find that sometimes, and I would say most of the time, many things are too theoretical, and if the person telling that thing tried to find concrete examples, they will realize that what they are saying is actually not really true or is partially wrong, and so mm, they would end up changing their belief. But and so for this reason, whenever someone gives me no concrete examples of something, I don't dismiss the theory, but I honestly believe that that may be a sign of weakness of the theory itself. Because, I mean, if you think about something, that's because you had some like concrete examples from which you elaborated a specific theory. But if you have a theory and you don't have anything to to attach it to reality, then it might be that that's because the theory is kind of weak, not in a negative sense, not in the sense that the theory is stupid and does not make any sense. It's because that it's just because that means, in my opinion, that you should go a little bit deeper into the theory, understand a little bit better what you are trying to say, so that maybe you come to a conclusion and you are able to elaborate a completely like correct theory, which is a solid and does relate to reality. So that was it for today's episode. I liked it. Honestly, I also liked making the images for this episode. I hope you like it as well. And that's it. See you guys.